Let's get clear on this right out of the gate. Intelligence isn't just about your IQ. It's not about test scores, titles, or how fast you can finish a book. Intelligence, the real kind, is seen in the way you show up in the world. And highly intelligent women, they leave a different kind of footprint. Let me break this down for you. I've met some of the most brilliant women, not because they speak the loudest, but because their actions speak when they don't have to say a word. And today, we're talking about the habits that make them stand out. Not just succeed. They don't say yes to keep the peace. They say yes when it aligns with their values. See, a highly intelligent woman doesn't fear disappointing others if it means being true to herself. She doesn't just protect her peace. She enforces it. Let's take a moment and get something straight. Saying no isn't a sign of selfishness. It's a sign of clarity. See, one of the biggest habits I've seen in highly intelligent women is this. They know their limits, and more importantly, they honor them. They don't stretch themselves thin just to be liked. They don't make space for everything and everyone at the cost of their own well-being. They don't run on fumes trying to meet expectations that were never theirs to begin with. And they sure don't apologize for protecting their peace. You ever seen someone who smiles while they're burning out on the inside? Of course you have. Because we live in a world that praises selflessness until it becomes self-destruction. But the highly intelligent woman, she knows better. She doesn't set herself on fire to keep everyone else warm. Now listen, boundary setting doesn't always come easy, especially if you've been raised or conditioned to believe your worth comes from your usefulness. If you've been taught that your no makes you difficult or unkind or even cold, but intelligent women, they've unlearned that. They've replaced that noise with something better, a quiet confidence that says, I don't owe anyone access to me just because they ask. Let's talk about what that actually looks like. It looks like checking your calendar before committing, and if there's no room, being okay with that. It looks like saying, I'd love to help, but I'm not available, without explaining your entire life story. It's not an attitude, it's alignment, and that alignment keeps their life from falling into chaos. Because here's the thing. A life without boundaries becomes a life run by everyone else's needs. You ever walked into a room and immediately felt the weight of everyone's expectations? A highly intelligent woman knows that feeling, but instead of shrinking to meet it, she stands in it. She evaluates, is this something I want? Is this something I need? Or is this something that's going to drain me? And once she has her answer, she responds accordingly without guilt. That doesn't mean she's cold. That doesn't mean she's distant. That means she's intentional. She knows the difference between being kind and being a doormat. You can be respectful without being available 24/7. You can be loving without saying yes to everything. You can be supportive without losing your own center. And when she sets those boundaries, she keeps them. That's the second half. People forget. It's not just drawing the line. It's defending it. It's what you do the second someone tries to step over it. That's where the growth really happens. Because people will test it. They'll push, not always out of malice, sometimes just out of habit. They're used to the version of you that said yes all the time. They're used to the version of you who overextended, overcommitted, overfunctioned. And when that version doesn't show up anymore, some people won't like it. But again, a highly intelligent woman knows that discomfort is not her problem to solve. She doesn't fold just to make someone else more comfortable. She doesn't explain herself into exhaustion. She doesn't shrink to be palatable. She shows up in truth, calm, grounded, and clear. And when someone crosses her boundary, whether that's in a relationship, at work, or in her family, she addresses it, not with rage, not with passive-aggressive silence, with clarity. She says, hey, I want to bring this up. I've shared where I stand on this, and I noticed that wasn't respected. That matters to me. Notice the tone there? It's not about creating drama. It's about creating understanding. But if that understanding isn't honored, she adjusts access. Because here's the part we don't talk about enough. Boundaries are not just about what you say. They're about what you do when those words aren't respected. And look, she doesn't do all this because she's trying to be better than anyone. She does it because she's responsible for her own life. She's not trying to manage everyone else's emotions, schedules, or drama. She's trying to build a life that feels healthy, whole, sustainable. And here's what else she knows. When you set boundaries, you teach people how to treat you. You send a message, not just to them, but to yourself. You tell yourself, I am worth protecting. My time is valuable. My peace is sacred. That's the heart of it. It's not about shutting people out. It's about letting the right people in, the ones who don't punish you for having standards, the ones who respect your no just as much as your yes, the ones who don't expect you to break yourself to stay in their good graces. She doesn't need everyone to approve, she just needs the right people to understand. So if you're someone who's learning to set boundaries and it feels uncomfortable, keep going. You're not doing something wrong. You're doing something right that just feels new. That's what growth looks like. Because at the end of the day, a highly intelligent woman doesn't confuse being needed with being valued. She knows her worth isn't based on how available she is. It's based on how aligned she is. And that's power. Quiet, steady, unapologetic power. You know what's easy? Reacting. You get an email that rubs you the wrong way. Boom, you're typing back. Someone makes a snide comment in a meeting. You fire right back. Someone you love says something that stings. Your tone shifts. Your walls go up and now you're in defense mode. But highly intelligent women, they do something different. They don't let the moment run the show. They slow it down. They pause. They reflect. Not because they're weak, but because they're wise. That pause, it's everything. It's where clarity lives. It's where you check your emotional pulse before you hit send, before you raise your voice, before you let someone else's chaos become your chaos. See, reacting is instinct. Reflecting is intention. And that intention, that's a skill. It's not natural. It's built. And highly intelligent women have built it over time, brick by brick, experience by experience, boundary by boundary. They've learned that emotions are not problems. They're signals. Anger says something feels off. Sadness says something hurts. Frustration says you're not being heard. But those emotions, they don't get to drive the car. They sit in the passenger seat. And the intelligent woman, she's the one with her hands on the wheel. She might feel the heat rise in her chest. She might feel her jaw tighten. But instead of letting those reactions lead the moment, she stops and asks herself, what's really going on here? Is this about them? Or is this hitting something in me? And right there, in that quiet space between stimulus and response, that's where the wisdom shows up. Let me give you an example. Imagine she's in a meeting, presenting an idea she's worked hard on, and someone, maybe out of their own insecurity, maybe just to feel important, dismisses her idea publicly right there in front of everyone. She feels it, that sting, that instinct to cut back, to put them in their place. But instead of reacting, she breathes. 1 beat, 2. Long enough to let the emotion speak without letting it scream. Then, calmly, she says, I'd like to circle back to that because there's value here and I don't want it to get lost. Simple, clear, direct, no drama, just strength. Because reacting is about proving something. Reflecting is about preserving something. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to clap back at every insult. You don't need to prove your worth in the heat of the moment. Highly intelligent women already know their worth. And because of that, they don't hand control of their emotions over to just anyone. They understand that control isn't about suppression. It's about direction. Look, I'm not saying they don't feel. They feel deeply. Sometimes even more than most, but they've trained themselves to respond, not explode. That training, it comes from experience, from moments where reacting made things worse, from times when saying the first thing that came to mind didn't bring peace. It brought regret. So now, they move different. When someone crosses a line, they don't shout. They show strength through composure. When something bothers them, they don't gossip. They address it with grace and clarity. When their buttons get pushed, they ask themselves, is this about power or is this about peace? Because sometimes peace looks like silence. Sometimes peace looks like walking away from a conversation that's only going in circles. Sometimes peace means letting someone else have the last word, not because they're right, but because your energy is too valuable to waste. That's not weakness, that's leadership. And here's something else. They also reflect on themselves. It's not just about regulating reactions to others. It's about being honest about their own patterns. If they snapped, they ask themselves why. If they shut down, they ask where that came from. They don't beat themselves up. They get curious. They learn. They grow. Because that's what intelligent women do. They don't avoid responsibility. They lean into it. They know the difference between reacting out of fear and responding from strength. They know the weight of their words, so they don't throw them around carelessly. They know that tone, timing, and delivery can be just as powerful as the message itself. So whether it's a confrontation at work, a tense moment in a relationship, or just a random Tuesday when life decides to test their patience, they pause, they take a moment. Maybe they journal, maybe they breathe, maybe they say, let me get back to you on that. And that moment of pause, that's not a delay, that's strategy. Because the truth is, emotional intelligence isn't about not feeling, it's about not letting those feelings run the show unchecked. It's about having the discipline to say, my piece is worth more than this argument. You know, we praise quick wit, we love clapbacks and sharp comebacks, but here's the truth. It takes a whole different level of intelligence to know when not to speak and know when the best thing you can do for your sanity is say less, not more. That kind of control, it's earned, it's practiced, it's deliberate. And it doesn't just affect her, it affects everyone around her. Because when she chooses reflection over reaction, she sets a tone. She shows people what mature communication looks like. She teaches others without saying a word how to handle pressure with poise. That's why people listen when she speaks. That's why her presence calms the room. That's why her leadership feels safe, solid, steady. So no, she doesn't blow up, even when she could. She doesn't post every thought, clap back at every critic, or let every emotion dictate her response. She pauses, she reflects, then she responds with intention, with truth, and with power. That's the habit. That's the difference. And that's emotional intelligence at its highest level. You can always tell who's truly intelligent by how they handle what they don't understand. Because here's the thing, being smart isn't just about having the right answers. It's about asking the right questions. And highly intelligent women, they ask questions. Not to interrogate, but to understand. Not to catch you off guard, but to get a little closer to the truth. They don't walk into a room assuming they've got it all figured out. They listen, they watch, they absorb. Because that's what curiosity is. It's a quiet kind of strength. It's not loud, it's not showy, it's not about proving a point. It's about staying open when everything in you wants to shut down. Let me make this real for you. Someone walks in with a different perspective. Maybe their politics don't match yours. Maybe their background challenges your assumptions. Maybe their lifestyle doesn't fit your personal values. Now, the easy thing to do, judge, write them off, get dismissive, say, well, they just don't get it. But the highly intelligent woman, she doesn't move like that. She leans in, not to agree, not to argue, just to understand. Because she knows that judgment is fast and curiosity is patient. And patience takes strength. She knows that when you judge someone too quickly, you cut off the chance to learn something. You shut the door before the conversation even starts. And you miss the chance to see the world from a wider lens. And intelligent women, they don't fear new perspectives. They seek them out. See, judgment feels powerful in the moment, like control, like certainty, but it's just a shortcut. It's you saying, I don't want to do the work of understanding. I'd rather label this and move on. But curiosity, that's slow. That's thoughtful. That says, I might not agree, but I want to know more. And that's not weak. That's emotionally mature. That's someone who's secure enough in themselves to sit with difference without feeling threatened by it. And when someone makes a mistake, says the wrong thing, shows up messy, intelligent women don't go straight to criticism. They ask, what's the story behind that behavior? Because they understand that most people are doing the best they can with what they know. And if they knew better, they might do better. That doesn't mean she excuses everything. Don't get it twisted. She holds people accountable, but she does it with context. She corrects without condemning. She offers truth without tearing down. Because curiosity asks, what happened to them? Judgment says there's something wrong with them, and that's a huge difference. She knows that curiosity keeps you humble. It keeps you learning. It reminds you that you don't have all the answers, and that's not a weakness. That's a strength. Think about it. The people who always need to be right, the ones who shut others down before hearing the full story. That's not confidence. That's fear wearing a loud voice. But when a woman walks into a space and stays open, even when it would be easier to shut down, that's a different kind of power. And it shows up in all kinds of ways. When she's in a disagreement, she listens, not to reload, to understand. When she sees someone struggling, she doesn't jump to conclusions. She asks, are you okay? Instead of, what's wrong with you? When she encounters something new, a culture, a belief system, a way of living, she stays curious. She doesn't need to agree to engage. She doesn't need to understand it completely to respect it. because her goal isn't to be the smartest in the room. It's to leave the room smarter. She knows that curiosity deepens relationships. It makes conversations richer. It turns surface level moments into meaningful connections. And she brings that same curiosity to herself. She doesn't beat herself up for every misstep. She doesn't judge every emotion that surfaces. Instead, she asks, why did I feel that way? What can I learn from that reaction? That self-inquiry, that inner curiosity, that's what helps her grow. That's how she evolves without shaming herself. Because here's the truth. Judgment builds walls. Curiosity builds bridges. And intelligent women, they're in the business of building bridges to others, to truth, to themselves. So when conflict arises, and it will, she doesn't go into attack mode. She doesn't gossip. She doesn't belittle. She gets clear. She asks questions like, help me understand what you meant by that. Or can you walk me through your thought process? And you'd be surprised what opens up when you ask instead of assume, when you seek clarity instead of clinging to your first impression. That's the kind of emotional intelligence that doesn't just solve problems, it prevents them. Now that doesn't mean she lets everything slide. Curiosity doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. You can be curious and still have standards. You can ask questions and draw the line. You can stay open without being naive. That's the balance she's mastered. She knows when to ask more and when to say, I've seen enough. She knows when to lean in and when to walk away. Because curiosity isn't about keeping the peace at all costs. It's about choosing to engage with intention, to stay open to truth, even if it's uncomfortable. So when others rush to criticize, she pauses. When others jump to blame, she investigates. When others see a problem, she looks for the root. That's not just intelligence, that's wisdom in motion. Because curiosity says there's more to this. Let me look closer. And that habit, that reflex to ask instead of assume, is what sets her apart. That's what makes her different. That's what makes her powerful.